Okay, we're sporting the green scally today because we're going to talk about Irish Peter McNeeley. Welcome to In the Real Life, where a snarky 50-something sports reporter turns the video camera on himself to share thoughts, opinions, rants, experiences, and who knows what else. Yep, I'm that snarky 50-something reporter. It's 2026, I'm 31 years into a career as a sports reporter, and now living in a world where it seems like nobody wants to read anymore. Time to join these kids with their videos on Faceplace and Insta Snaps and Tickety Talk. So hey, hit that subscribe or like button or follow button. I smash all the buttons. Just do what you need to do. So, people ask me a lot, who are the coolest athletes I've gotten to interview and who made your job easier and more fun? And there's good people and people you struggle with in every sport. But over my 19 years I spent as a sports reporter at the Hartford Courant, the most enjoyable time I had doing interviews and writing stories about any sport was boxing. I got the chance to become the regular boxing writer at the Courant, and when I did, it was kind of during the rise of Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun, as they were kind of coming online as not only two of the biggest casinos in the world, but they were also trying to get into big-time boxing. And so it offered me the chance to get the opportunity to cover some amazing fights. So it was December 21st, 1996, when I sat ringside for my first professional fight. It was in the old bingo hall at Mohegan Sun, and I was working as a sports reporter for the Courant. It was an HBO Boxing After Dark series fight, and those typically were Saturday night fights that usually went live at like 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And I had never been to a fight in my life, and I had always been a casual boxing fan, and on that night I got the amazing eye-opening introduction to how different boxing was on TV than it is in person. I've long told people that there are two things I've covered as a reporter that I learned the TV product does it no justice whatsoever in comparison to the live product. The first is NHRA drag racing, which is just like, if you've never experienced a live NHRA event, I mean, it's as wild. It doesn't come close on TV to the raw, just over-encompassing sensory overload that you get standing next to a drag strip when top fuel dragsters are going down. But, also mention sitting ringside at a professional fight. You just realize that all these years you watch it on TV, when you see it live for the first time, TV does it no justice whatsoever. You just don't get a feel. It doesn't convey the true physical abuse that boxers absorb in a ring. And you sit back and you watch fights on TV and you're like, wow, these guys are beating the crap out of each other. But when you sit ringside and you see and feel the physical brutality, it's just an eye-opening experience. And the first time, my first professional fight I covered, it was an IBF lightweight world championship fight. Philip Holliday was a solid journeyman fighter, and he was fighting this up-and-coming fighter at that point named Ivan Robinson. And between the two guys, they threw 2,500 punches in the fight. It was an epic whirlwind fight. Being that it was my first live fight, I mean, it was like going to your first NHL game and seeing 15 goals scored. It was amazing. It was stunning. And I just immediately wanted to cover more boxing. And luckily, I got that chance at the Courant to cover some amazing fights at the casinos. And at the same time, Hartford had this really thriving boxing community. The state of Connecticut all around had a really thriving boxing community. So I got to not only cover some really big national fights at the casinos, but I also kind of got to document the rise of a few local guys who made it to the upper levels of boxing. A couple guys from Hartford who actually fought for world titles. So that was a really fun part of it too. But the thing with boxing was covering boxing meant the chance to write great features because, and I'll say this forever, boxers are the most amazing people to interview because they're the most brutally honest athletes in the world. There's no filters. They have nothing to hide. There's no PR fronting with anything they do. They're just brutally honest people. And yeah, I remember learning that a few times when I'd be interviewing boxers and they just opened up about everything personally in their lives. They weren't afraid to say anything. And one of those stories that always stuck out to me was I was writing an advance story for a fight that was happening at Foxwoods. I think it was Foxwoods, might have been Mohegan. It's all a blur at this point. They were both putting on so many fights. But it was Peter McNeeley, and he was on kind of a comeback. And if you don't remember the name Peter McNeeley, his claim to fame was that he just got absolutely destroyed by Mike Tyson when Mike Tyson got out of prison in 1995. Peter McNeeley was Mike Tyson's first fight out of prison, and Peter McNeeley just got destroyed. Peter was this big, white, goofy guy, heavyweight from Medfield, Mass., who kind of was that tomato can they threw in for Tyson's first fight. And then kind of fast forward to 1988, after, you're 3 years after the Tyson fight, and McNeeley was coming back, and I remember calling him up to work on this fight story in advance of this boxing card, and he got on the phone, and you could tell just immediately getting on the phone that this guy was just a whirlwind of craziness and emotion and stories. And, as it turned out, even before he had fought Tyson, Peter kind of had his demons in his life. He had some drug abuse and alcohol problems, and getting the opportunity to fight Mike Tyson and get that huge payday indirectly only made those things a lot worse for Peter. It kind of ended up in a downward spiral for him after he fought Tyson, where he ended up back to a pretty bad cocaine addiction and was in and out of rehab for a while. And, he was unabashedly open about everything and essentially said, if I never had the chance to fight Mike Tyson and make all that money that I did for that fight, it probably would have turned out a lot different for me over the last 3 years with all the issues I've had in my life and all that sort of thing. And it was just this phone call of him going on and on about how fighting Mike Tyson just created all these messes and unexpected issues in his life. And then, kind of at the end of talking to him and all these stories, I asked him, if you had the chance, would you fight Mike Tyson again if you knew where it would end up leading you? And he just immediately yelled into the phone, "You're effing A, right? I would do it all over again. That was the greatest night of my life, and that was the greatest ride of my life, and that's why I'm still in the sport of boxing." So here's this guy saying that this fight basically destroyed his life, and yeah, he would absolutely do it all over again. And that was boxers and boxing. And I think back to my opportunities in boxing, and I mean, some of the coolest stories were just being in gyms and being at weigh-ins with boxers. I was at what was basically an amateur club fight at the San Juan Center in Hartford one night, and I kind of see this guy poking out from the back room and trying to lay low in the crowd, and I was working in the back room later on, and it was Mike Tyson, who was just kind of hiding out in the back room. At that point, Mike was living in Farmington, and he just kind of snuck into the San Juan Center to watch these amateur kids fight and was just trying to stay out of the limelight. I went over and introduced myself, and he was awesome. He was a blast to talk to, and said how he was just trying to hide out there and he didn't want to bring any attention to himself and didn't want any stories done about him. But it was one of those cool stories of covering boxing that you never knew who you were going to meet. You never knew who you were going to run into at these fights. It was a fight at Foxwoods where I got to meet Pete Rose, but it wasn't just meet Pete Rose. I showed up before the fight, and Pete Rose is sitting at press row in the seat next to me. When I showed up, I introduced myself, and he said he just decided to sit there because the seat was better than the front row seat ticket that he had been given. So, we ended up talking the whole fight, and here I am. I spent the night sitting next to Pete Rose for a night on press row. But that was boxing. You just never knew what you were going to get, and loved every minute of it.